In this video, we are going to be getting to talk to one of our team members who had a tornado touch down less than 2 miles from his house. So, joining us here is Dan from Wisconsin, and also Rob is on the video tonight. So, Dan, kind of tell us a little bit about what this past week with all the Wisconsin tornadoes was like for you, man. I mean, it was wild up there, over 25 tornadoes here just in the last week.
A lot of extreme weather in a short amount of time. Certainly not what we typically see up here. And certainly not this early, being in April in the weather season either. Our peak season for severe weather is typically in June. And this particular setup over that course of that week was different in a lot of ways that normally only the planes get to see. But we got to experience it last week.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a multi day severe weather system that you had, and it really started on that Monday, but Tuesday the 14th was kind of the first day here. And this is kind of what we saw kind of transpire throughout the day on Tuesday. So, I mean, what was Tuesday like for you guys there? What was the feeling like there in Wisconsin with your first big weather day?
Well, some other severe weather led up to that as well. That Monday, we had some severe weather come through, but nothing like we were going to experience on Tuesday. You could tell from kind of like a lot of the verbiage that was being used in the outlooks and in the forecasts, and the meteorologists on TV would be going over some extra steps and measures that they typically don't always go through when we do have severe weather expected in our area. And those were kind of some signs and indications that Tuesday might not be your typical spring severe weather day up in my area over here. And that's what kind of tipped things off. And then, you know, paying attention to the weather and having access to models and that, um, conditions were showing that they were going to be very favorable for severe weather, including tornadoes, and it came to fruition that day.
Yeah. And Rob, you were kind of covering it live for us here on YouTube throughout that evening on Tuesday. So, what was that like trying when you were, covering it and reaching out to Dan and letting him know, hey, there's a tornado warning for your area?
Uh, well, first thing, it was good to help people in Wisconsin, especially Dan here. But it was definitely something that taught me because before this, we don't really get a lot of severe weather steps where you have the warm advection kind of reaching over north of Wisconsin in April or even March. I mean, this is definitely an early season step. So just to
Hmm.
see that firsthand really just shows you how unpredictable the weather can really be. And the importance of making sure you have multiple ways to receive alerts overnight. So glad I was able to help Dan out with that and provide the information they need to stay safe that night.
So, Dan, going back to Tuesday night, here's a map of the tornado tracks that happened that day. And you can see there were actually multiple tornadoes there across southeast Wisconsin. And that EF1 being just about 2.5 miles away from you. What was that like for you in that moment when that was coming over pretty much right over your head?
Yeah. So of course my eyes were glued to radar. I was paying attention to this while it was still way far out to the west, but I could see its track was heading towards my general direction very much. Um, so they ended up having tornado warnings before that, and then I could see there's a picture of the reflectivity. It's a good size hook on there. That particular one, I believe, is the Sussex
Hmm.
tornado. That would have been off to my north. But there was another area of rotation that caught my eye that was coming out of Janesville, and it was all along a line, and you could definitely see a pronounced notch into that line as it was coming through. And so, having been able to see that kind of coming, of course, we were on high alert already. And it didn't show any signs of weakening. Typically, a lot of times as those storms move east, especially with it getting later into the night at that time, we usually see them start to lose their strength by the time they get as far east as I am. And that was not the case. It showed no signs of slowing down. So we kept very weather aware and alert of what was happening around us. And as it got even closer, that's when we made the decision to take shelter. We went downstairs, and we could hear wind hitting the house from both sides. There was a bit of some howling that was occurring that you don't typically hear from just normal straight line winds. And as we were making our way downstairs is exactly when they issued a tornado warning. And the verbiage was in my town that they announced, and that's when it kind of confirmed for me that I knew what I was looking at was valid.
Wow.
So we did the right things. We got into the basement, the safest place where we could be, and we found out later, of course, as you could see from that tornado track, that an EF1 did touch down just a few miles away from us. It did some damage to some barns and that. It's pretty rural where I am, but there are some towns in there that were affected by that tornado. And we just don't typically see that a whole lot down here this far east.
Wow. That is quite yeah, that's got to be scary, cuz it was an EF1. I believe it had winds sustained right around 110 miles per hour. I think that is what the report said. And up there in Wisconsin, like you were saying, you really don't see that, especially this time of year. You've mentioned to me before in the past that there have been times where, you're still getting snow in April and stuff like that. And here you're having not only one tornado, but we're talking multiple tornadoes, and not only a single day, but really this was a 4 or 5 day event. Tuesday was really just the beginning of this. How did the week progress as we got into the later half of the week?
So Wednesday, that next day on Wednesday, we had some more severe weather come through. It wasn't as bad as Tuesday. It still popped off some warnings. That wasn't as bad as forecasted. They nailed it, I think, pretty much head on. That Tuesday was going to be the peak day of those three, being Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then that Thursday was actually a beautiful day. And then they had forecasted out already that Friday was going to be another potentially significant day. And we're probably going to go into that here pretty soon as well.
Yeah,
but
so here is
Friday
kind
was
of the
quite
loop
an
of Friday,
active day
yeah.
as well.
And it jumped off right early in the afternoon there across western Wisconsin. Yeah. And then now Friday, did you kind of evacuate from your area knowing the risk that you were going to have there in southeast Wisconsin, or what was your guys' game plan on Friday?
Well, we actually did. The game plan on Friday was obviously pay close attention to it. I have the advantage of knowing pretty well what I'm looking at with what I can see on radar and what to expect. Tuesday, it was a different setup than Tuesday. Tuesday was more of a linear setup, but Friday we knew there was going to be a chance for some isolated supercells. And those did develop ahead of the line behind it that you'll see coming in the frame here now. But those initial set of storms that came through, and that one that went into Rock County where Janesville is, that was an HP supercell. And that one had very positive indication of rotation. It was warned. I believe they had it confirmed at one point. And similar situation where you can see that it's headed towards you. Now, Friday, those storms that were producing those tornadoes out ahead of that main line, fortunately, in a sense of being able to prepare for it, were moving very slow. They were moving at maybe 30 miles per hour or so, maybe 30, 35. So it gives you a little bit more opportunity to look at it, make a decision. What do you think it's going to do by the time it gets near your location? And at that point, it was pretty clear to me that, okay, we're going to be pretty close to another target area here again. So we made a decision to go mobile, and we headed southeast, just north of the border of Illinois, and kind of waited it out for a while. We were there for probably about an hour or so as the
Wow.
majority of those storms came through, and they did pop off tornado warnings for my home location. So I believe we made the right choice, given that situation, where you have that much lead time in advance, because I knew what I was looking at, to make a smart decision and just simply get out of the path of what was coming.
Yeah, a lot of them on Friday were, a couple of them, the stronger ones, those EF1s that you see there on the map, those were kind of in the east side of Janesville, and then they're coming into, Walsworth County, the Elkhorn, Delavan area. And then also there were, number of those EF0s just kind of south of Milwaukee and stuff like that there on Friday. So definitely seems like your plan of going down toward the border definitely paid off in that sense. Got you out of the heightened danger zone. And Rob, for you, both of us, I know we were covering this here on our YouTube channel on Friday with a
Yeah.
live stream for goodness, almost 6 hours that day. And what was that? What was that like for you? I mean, because Dan mentioned a good point with the speed. The ones in Wisconsin were moving a lot slower than a lot of the storms just off to the south in Illinois and over in Iowa. Those were moving at 50, some of them even 60 miles per hour. So it could have been a very different story if those storms hadn't been moving as slow. So what was it like for you, Rob, covering all of that?
Um, it was definitely different, especially when you had two different modes, like we were just saying, with the supercellular mode that was coming in Wisconsin, and then you also had the linear, which is back in Illinois and Missouri. I remember the night very well. There were several reported tornadoes off the line and off the cluster, and then once it moved to Michigan, things started to subside. But it just shows how much intense the weather can get, even in circumstances where it's just one area, because there's more that was behind it. So even though we did it for 6 hours, I felt like we did something right by giving Dan good information, helping him stay safe, which is what we were seeing that night.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Now, Dan, when you were down south, away from your house, stuff like that, there were still tornado warnings issued where you were at, correct?
There were. Where I was ended up going tornado warned pretty much as soon as we started to leave the area, headed back north towards our home, and we took on torrential rain. Um, there was a point where I could barely even see the road, and it was dark at this point. So there was a point where we actually pulled off for a few minutes, safely, not underneath an overpass. But we had to wait it out for a few minutes before that finally went through. But yes, that portion where I was at did eventually go tornado warn right as we were leaving. So yes, technically we were driving through a tornado warning, but at that point, um, the signs of rotation were less, uh, and by that point, when they issued the tornado warning, it wasn't for the isolated supercell anymore. That had already moved past. This was for the line behind it.
Yeah.
And they basically issued those tornado warnings because there were signs that there was embedded spin-ups as the line was moving through. I do believe that most, if not all of those, were radar indicated only. So they did issue tornado warnings for that line as it moved all the way from what would have been Walworth and Waukesha County into Milwaukee, Racine, and Kenosha.
Yeah.
But at some point, all of southeast Wisconsin was under a tornado warning at some point during the night.
Yeah, you can see that right here on this image. Pretty much from, like you said, Milwaukee all the way down to the border. At that point, this was just before 8 o'clock Central Time on Friday the 17th there, where, yeah, all of southeast Wisconsin was inside of those tornado warnings, which is, I mean, have you ever seen that in your life up there in Wisconsin where you've had this widespread of tornado warnings?
Not with the supercells. and not with the amount of warnings. Um, the tornado warnings that we typically get at this part of the state are usually those linear setups where you can get EF0, EF1 spin up, sometimes even in between scans to make those are hard to find.
Yeah.
Those are normally the ones that we typically see if they make it. But this had a lot of energy to work through. So by the time that Milwaukee, Racine, and Kenosha went tornado warned, it was well dark. Typically speaking, a lot of times, like I said, they have a tendency to weaken by the time they get that close to the lake. But not on Friday. They still had enough energy to cause to prompt those tornado warnings, and Milwaukee County had at least one warning, maybe two. I don't recall. But yeah, typically not a setup like that. No.
Do you ever compare this to maybe other storm systems that you've had in the past? How would this compare to other severe weather events that you've had since you've been there in Wisconsin? I mean, is this probably one of the worst ones that you've experienced, or is it kind of up there?
I would say it would rank towards the top, given a multitude of factors. Given the fact that Monday we had severe weather, most of those were severe thunderstorm warnings. And then Tuesday was a big day, and let's not forget Wednesday we had more, and then Friday being another big tornado warning day, similar to Tuesday, albeit a different setup. For that many warnings and occurrences that close to one another, matching that intensity, that's probably the strongest one that I can recall.
Yeah, and Rob, I mean, when we were covering this, I remember seeing, the warnings all the way up near the UP of Michigan, the tornado warnings, like you see there in the loop. And I can't recall any time where I've seen that quantity of warnings across Wisconsin from north, central, south, all going on simultaneously. I mean, to me, that was just a record-breaking. Friday was just an absolutely record-breaking number of tornado warnings that we had. I mean, for the entire day across the country, I believe it was 303 severe thunderstorm warnings and 150 tornado warnings just in that one day alone. Like, that was one of the most active events. I mean, outside of something like April 26th, 25th through 27th, 2011, that tornado outbreak obviously was huge, but this one was definitely, I think, Dan, like you said, it was up there for me personally as a meteorologist, just forecasting it and then seeing it all unfold. It definitely blew my expectations a little bit, and it was only a moderate risk, and they didn't even have the moderate risk up there in Wisconsin.
And just to, I guess, further iterate how uncommon that is. Typically, Wisconsin sees on average about 23 tornadoes a year. We had 23 tornadoes in that week.
Yeah.
We've had we've had 4 EF3 tornadoes from, was it 2014 through 2025?
Yeah.
And last week we had 3.
Yeah. In 1 week, they're in the state of Wisconsin. So, I mean, and your severe weather season really is still yet to come, historically, climatologically speaking, coming up here in June, right? End of May and into June?
That's right. This far north, our peak season is June. June is, if you go by the numbers, statistically speaking, our most probable for tornadoes. But even in prior years, I can't think of another June event that had a setup like what we had last week. And that obviously being in April, so quite rare.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So as we wrap up here, I mean, what would your messaging be to the folks of Wisconsin as we continue on here through the severe weather season, Dan, what would you tell folks that are watching this?
I always recommend take a spotter's course. Even if you don't have the intention of actively participating in submitting weather reports as a spotter, I feel it can be very beneficial to you to at least know and kind of understand more what you're looking at. When you're watching the meteorologist on TV and they're explaining some things and going over some things, it'll probably make even that much more sense to you so you can have a better understanding of it. If you are out somewhere and you know that there's severe weather in the area and you see something that's questionable, you'll have the knowledge to know, is this something I should be paying attention to, or is this something that might not be what it looks like? My other recommendation is have a way to receive weather alerts. Highly recommend a weather radio. Power goes out, you still have batteries, you have a way to get warnings. Cell phones are great for receiving alerts, but what if you're in an area that doesn't have any signal? If you're sheltering, you're probably in a basement or some other sort of shelter that probably the very good chance you don't have a signal down there. So have a way to receive alerts, especially overnight. That would be my two biggest suggestions. Recommend taking a spotter's course so you can be a little bit more knowledgeable in these types of things, and have a way to receive alerts when it's most important.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree.
And Rob, I mean, from your perspective, as we continue on here through the severe weather season, doing the work that you're doing, with the broadcasting and live streaming and stuff like that. Obviously, this week, again, we're under the gun, severe weather and stuff like that. What would be your key takeaway from what you saw with the week up in Wisconsin?
I would say, if you're even in a marginal risk, if you're in a general risk, even if you're in no risk, be ready for anything because I'm not sure if you heard, but we did have a general risk in California when there was 2 tornado reports. So my advice would just be make sure you're prepared. Make sure even if an area that you're in may not look like it might get severe weather, it definitely could be possible. So just make sure you have that, like Dan said, the radio, the phone, and multiple ways to receive alerts, and make sure you also find somebody that can be with you to help get you ready for that, so you can ease the pressure, because I know sometimes these could be high pressure situations.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So it's good to have like somebody that you can confide in to help you get ready and get those ideas and tips. So yeah, that's important too, is communication and also getting the right information. So
you bring up a good point, Rob. And Dan, that I actually have a follow-up question with that. So leading up to this event, what was that like? How were you, I guess, like communicating that with family and friends there in the area? What was their response when all of this was unfolding kind of in real time and stuff like that? Because I know you were posting a lot to social media, and obviously you had your family with you and different things like that. So how did that all unfold for you?
Yeah, that was a large part of it. Friends and family know that, I pay close attention to the weather, obviously, of course. So I will make posts on Facebook and that of not only of what's being forecasted, but also what I'm seeing, what I'm thinking that it's going to do. And I make those posts. I try to include screenshots of what the radar looks like. Most people don't have the apps that we typically use, being weather, into weather more. So kind of getting that information out ahead of time. I had a few friends and family text me as well, just, aside from Facebook, where I was doing my best to kind of keep them informed on what's going on. And all of that helps. And the other thing I'll add to my recommendation list is have more than one source, whether it be a weather radio or ensuring that your phone is capable of receiving alerts. Maybe it's just watching TV on your local station. Have more than one way, because that way, exactly. Because if one way fails, then you have a backup and another source.
Exactly. For sure. For sure. And that's, I think, would be my takeaway too, is have multiple ways to receive warnings. And that's why we encourage you guys when we're doing our live streams to make sure you're subscribed to us, have those notifications turned on, because we're here to be another layer to, weather preparedness and safety and stuff like that, and trying to communicate that to you guys. And it's a great place to get to learn and stuff like that. So I always tell people, connect with us on Discord. It's a great way to learn. Because weather affects every single person, whether or not you want it to. It's going to affect you at some point in time. So, Dan, Rob, I appreciate you guys taking the time to talk with us this evening and sharing your insights on the Wisconsin tornado outbreak of 2026. So thank you guys. And again, be sure that you connect with us here on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, share this video with a friend that needs to know what to do the next time that severe weather is rolling into their area, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.